What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. I am the host and moderator of the Crowdsourced Politics podcast, Cypher. Today we have a lot of news to cover, and we'll be getting into it shortly. But before we get into the news, let's talk about what we have in store for y'all in the next coming months or so. So, what's coming up? Well, first, I will be producing content from Scotland. I am going to Scotland for 2 weeks, managed to save up enough money and reward points in order to make the trip pretty manageable. So I'm going to be producing some content while I'm in Scotland, as well as that sort of thing. But I will be not streaming those 2 weeks while I'm there because I'm going to be camping and doing some other stuff. So we'll be off the last 2 weeks in April. So it's April 17th through the 1st of May. We'll be back on that Thursday. I believe that is May. Let me look at it really quick. Calendar. We will be back on the 4th. So we'll be still streaming from now until then, but we are going to be gone the last 2 weeks of April. So be sure to check out those. We're also going to be producing a bit more content on a regular basis. So I have found an editor, and that editor is supposed to be working with me for the next couple of weeks, getting used to what we're kind of going for this show and the like, and I will be taking work off my plate so I can do work on other things such as producing actual podcast episodes again. So that's what we're going to be doing. Once the editor is up and running, they will be producing at least 3 to 4 segments a week from this newscast and putting it up on YouTube, as well as helping edit the actual podcast. With the actual podcast, we have determined what our first episode is going to be. And the first episode of the actual podcast and essays we're going to be bringing to y'all will be on artificial intelligence. We're going to be exploring how ChatGPT works, large language learning models, natural language processing, and the like, and how the revolution is coming for everyone's jobs, but not in the way of the doom and gloom that most people had predicted in the last 5 years, at least not for the next 5 years. So we'll be talking about that and the kind of ethics and ramifications and philosophy that go into all the things that is AI, artificial intelligence, and augmented intelligence. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. So, welcome. Welcome. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get into... Let's go ahead and get into the actual show now. All right? We're going to get into the actual show. Videos and news. All right, welcome back, everybody, and let's get into the news. And as we always do, we will be starting off with updates on Ukraine. So fighting in Bakhmut continues with neither side willing to end the bloody battle, according to the commander of the Ukrainian ground forces. Russia is losing considerable strength, and very soon we will take advantage of this opportunity, as we once did near Kyiv, Kharkiv, and all the areas that Ukraine had previously liberated from Russian occupation, the commander has said. Reuters journalists near the front lines north of Bakhmut saw signs consistent with the claim that Russian offensive in the area could be flagging. At a Ukrainian-held village west of Soledar on Bakhmut's northern outskirts, the intensity of Russian bombardment was noticeably less compared to just 2 days earlier. Quote, "It was really hot here a few weeks ago, but in the last 3 days it has been more quiet," said a Ukrainian soldier who used the call sign Kamen, or stone. Continuing on, he said, quote, "We can see that this is the enemy's airstrikes. If before there were 5 to 6 air raids in a day, today we only had 1 helicopter attack, and it was and it was too far and so ineffective," said the soldier, a member of the anti-aircraft unit in the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade. A slowdown in Russia's assaults on Bakhmut could be a consequence of Moscow diverting its troops and resources to other areas. For its part, Britain said on Thursday that Russian troops had been making gains further north this month, partially regaining control over the approaches to the town of Kreminna, a Ukrainian target. Intense battles were also underway further south. Ukrainian troops on the defensive for 4 months will launch a long-awaited counter-assault very soon, now that Russia's huge winter offensive is losing steam without taking Bakhmut, Ukrainians' top ground forces commanders said today. The remarks were the strongest indication yet from Kyiv that it was close to shifting tactics, having absorbed Russia's onslaught through a brittle winter and prevented Moscow from claiming its first victory since last August. Russia's Wagner mercenaries, trying to capture Bakhmut in the longest and bloodiest battle of the war, are, quote, losing considerable strength and are running out of steam, said Kyiv's ground forces commander. And in news that broke late this afternoon, the Wagner group has apparently given up on fighting according to a Bloomberg report. As of this past Monday, Wagner posted a recruitment notice of offering deployments to African countries that would last between 9 to 14 months, Bloomberg reported. One of the things that we will be talking about in a future Cypher State episode, which is going to be part of our regular podcast series, will be what the Wagner Group is and how it came into existence in the areas in which it operates in. So be sure to look on that. The fact that they're going back to Africa shows that it needs to give some of its resources to the African countries that have been supporting it in its mission as well. All right. So continuing on, though, China's President Xi Jinping made his first visit to Russia this week. Russian President Vladimir Putin appeared to focus on impressing the Chinese leader, according to reporting from Business Insider. We all know that as of the Ukraine war and the sanctions that have been going on against Russia, Xi Jinping's made Putin his bitch. Because that is exactly what's happening here. You got to keep your friends close and your enemies closer, and China is keeping them very close. So what do I mean by that? I don't mean to say that China and Russia are like enemies, but China is going to exploit any advantage that it can in order to buttress its own ability to do whatever it wants. And in this case, having Russia buy its munitions and weapons and whatever else have you and sell oil cheaply to China greatly helps China. So China will continue to help Russia where it can without completely destabilizing the current world order. Of course, some of that might come to an end or get a little more dicey as the United States further pursues a anti-Chinese agenda or anti-Chinese Communist Party agenda in the coming months and years, which we will talk about later on in this broadcast. So let's continue on, though. So Putin is known for playing games when meeting world leaders, sometimes keeping them waiting for hours and trying to intimidate them. But when he greeted Xi, Putin's welcome was effusive. A photo op in which the two posed between oversized Russian and Chinese flags seemed designed to trumpet the importance of their alliance. Online commentators have signaled that this is the rebuilding of the Russian-Sino alliance that dated back to the Soviet Union and the Cold War. Maybe Mitt Romney was right when he was talking about all these things, but, that is for another time to discuss. Continuing on, Putin personally escorted Xi to his car at the conclusion of the summit on Wednesday, a cordial gesture observers say was virtually unheard of. But his hosting efforts did not pay off, experts say, with Russia clearly shown to be the junior party as Xi reaped rewards from Russia and Russia gained little to nothing. While China has refused to join the blockade adhered to by Ukraine's Western allies, Xi has provided Russia with vital diplomatic, political, and economic support in this conflict. China has continued to buy Russian oil, albeit at a hefty discount, as much as 50%, and which has helped keep the Russian economy afloat during these trying times. China has also prepared to sell goods to Russia, including jet parts and electronics jamming equipment, which Western companies are forbidden from providing to Russia under Western sanctioned regime. The 3-day summit featured a host of announcements of joint Chinese and Russian projects, but analysts can categorize the deals as one-sided, giving Xi's China economic opportunity while doing little to strengthen Russia, although it is helping Russia fight its war in Ukraine. The U.S. taunted Putin in the wake of this summit, with National Security Council spokesman John Kirby saying Russia is now the junior partner in this alliance. One could argue has always been the case. Putin tells his people he's fighting for Russians. Quote, sorry, this is a quote. Quote, Putin tells his people he's fighting for Russia's sovereignty. In truth, he has mortgaged the Kremlin to Beijing, tweeted Sam Green, a director of the Center for European Policy Analysis and a professor at King's College in London. Analysts said that China will likely seek to exert its new leverage over Russia to expand its own global power. China could seek to pressure Russia to loosen its ties with India, one of Chinese key regional allies, or rivals, or even to accept a Chinese military presence in Central Asia, which Russia regards as within its own sphere of influence. It's unclear that Russia would have much leverage to oppose such request under the current circumstances. Without even mentioning the war, the two leaders vowed to jointly promote their shared agenda to challenge the existing international order. They see the New World Order as defined by multilateralism and the democratization of international relations. They share the geopolitical conviction that in the era of great power competition, China and Russia must align and cooperate to survive their competition with the United States. So this is going back to some Cold War mentality, as has been the case for a bit of a time here now. And it's one of those reasons why neocons have been pushing the United States to kind of leave Russia alone and actually ally itself with Russia against China, because they feel that China is the greater threat. We'll see some of that again later on in this program. Now, during his visit, Xi barely mentioned the Ukrainian conflict beyond saying China had an impartial position. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said China is very carefully watching the global response to the invasion. And as we've reported before, China has previously stated that all international borders should be respected and adhered to. Some analysts say that this is because of the Chinese One China policy in dealing with Taiwan. And if Taiwan breaks away, it wants to be able to have its own ability to invade Taiwan and bring it back into the Chinese fold proper. They are not doing that overtly, at least right now. And some people expect that they won't be able to at all. We did a previous episode on Cypher State about this, and we'll probably do another one as a follow-up, since the zero COVID policy has ended in China and Xi Jinping has also cemented his power hold there. So be on the lookout for that as well. Tiberius, if you're watching this, we want you back on the show. And we'll have the editor to do it and get it published way quicker. For sure. So yeah, that's what we're doing here. In other news, the International Criminal Court, or the ICC, issued warrants this week for the arrest of Russian President Vladimir Putin and Russia's Commissar for Children's Rights. According to Axios, the warrants were issued for the unlawful deportation and unlawful transfer of children from the occupied parts of Ukraine to Russia in violation of the Rome Statute. This is one of the areas in which people can claim that genocide is happening because the forceful removal of children is or it can be at least partly attributed to a step towards genocide. Remember, genocide does not mean the outright killing of a people, although that is often a very big part of it, but the cultural erasure of a people. Forcefully deporting children to another country and forcefully re-educating them to believe they're actually ethnic Russians, or how the United States did the whole like kill the savage, save the man kind of thing when it came to Native Americans with its boarding school policy. These are aspects of genocide, because if you stop a people, if you take the kids and stop them from perpetuating their own culture, then you kill the culture, which is what genocide is about. So the ICC alleged that Putin's committed the crimes of directly, or sorry, the ICC alleged that Putin committed the crimes directly, jointly with, and or through others, and failed to properly exercise control over civilian and military subordinates who committed the acts or allowed for their commission. The transfers and deportations of Ukrainian children are allegedly still ongoing, according to the ICC. Russia has systematically relocated at least 6,000 children from Ukraine to Russia since the start of the war, a conflict observatory report published in February had said. The ICC's 123 member states are obligated to arrest Putin if he steps into their territory, but Putin is unlikely to travel to any country where he would face such a risk. Any attempt to arrest Vladimir Putin would amount to a declaration of war against Russia, his ally Dmitry Medvedev said, while directly threatening to attack the seat of any government that allowed that to happen. And that, my friends, concludes our segment on Ukraine. Yeah, so hey, welcome everybody. If you're just joining us, this is the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. We do this every Thursday, starting at roughly 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, going to roughly about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, covering the news that was with the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. We keep you covered with news to filter out the noise. It's another little saying we like to have. So if you're just joining us, welcome. Glad you're all here. We will be getting to the Trump indictments later on in the show, and I see Lola J is saying that in the comments, so I appreciate you pulling that up here. Let me go ahead and get that on screen for everybody. Every Trumper was kung fu fighting. Gen 6 went as fast as lightning. So yes. So this is going to be an interesting one. And thank you, Ace Fail Winter. Appreciate it. Yes, my hair is looking good. This is all going away, though, after my Scotland trip. Be on the lookout for that. I'm starting a new arc. All right. So we need to now get into... Oops. Let me before that. We need now to get into some news domestically, but still talking about China. And of course, I am talking about the hearing that happened today in regards to TikTok. So let's go ahead and get started into that. One of the big stories this week in the U.S. House of Representatives is the hearing before the Committee of Energy and Commerce, where the CEO of TikTok appeared today. Let's go ahead and talk about it. There are legislatures on both sides of the political aisle who support banning TikTok in the U.S., as we reported before on this very show. And there are legislatures who don't think a ban should be instituted at all. The stated concern by those on the side of banning is the potential for the Chinese government to collect data on American users and use it for nefarious purposes that the United States doesn't have any control over. Already, TikTok has been banned from all government-owned devices in the United States, which is probably a fair thing to do. In fact, I would probably go as far as to say ban Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff, if you're on a government device. That's me. The political storm surrounding China-owned social media platform continues to intensify, with the Biden administration threatening to ban the app entirely in the United States. The platform was first targeted formally by the Trump administration in 2020, with an executive order prohibiting U.S. companies from doing business directly with ByteDance, the owner of TikTok. Biden revoked that order in June of 2021 under the stipulation that the U.S. Committee on Foreign Investment conduct a review of the company. When that review stalled, Biden announced that TikTok must sell all its Chinese-owned shares or face a ban in the United States. But is this even really a problem? Is China even now accessing private information about TikTok's American users? Is it China's intention to manipulate content for the purposes of influencing the opinions of American citizens? Those are the questions that we have to answer. And for China's part, China does have a national security law that requires companies under its jurisdiction to cooperate with a broad range of security activities. TikTok is really only a national security risk insofar as the Chinese government may have leverage over TikTok or its parent company. The main issue is that the public has few ways of verifying whether or not or how that leverage has been exercised. As a reminder, TikTok doesn't operate in China, but its parent company, ByteDance, does. Privacy and security researchers who have looked under the hood at TikTok's apps say that, as far as they can tell, TikTok isn't much different from other social networks in terms of the data it collects or how it communicates with company servers. That's still a lot of personally revealing information, but it doesn't imply that TikTok's app itself is inherently malicious or a kind of spyware. That's why the concerns really focus on TikTok and ByteDance's relationship to the Chinese government, and kind of skirting the issue about how other companies control and process the data they collect on all of us. According to reporting from Mediaite, the platform has repeatedly denied the claim that the Chinese government has access to US user data. Today, the CEO of TikTok, whose name is Shou Chu, appeared before the House Energy and Commerce Committee, the first time a TikTok chief executive has appeared before Congress. He used his appearance to try to calm lawmakers' fears about data practices. Sorry, let me start that one over. He used his appearance to try to calm lawmakers' fears about data practices and commit to not allowing the Chinese government to influence TikTok in any way. Ahead of Chu's appearance, members of Congress criticized the company and Chu himself, suggesting that his testimony could not even be trusted. One of those members is a member of Congress is Senator Mark Warren from Virginia. We will now turn over to some of his words about this subject, where he did an interview with Scripps News. Let's go ahead and get that set up here. All right, cool. Let's hold on one second. Oh, no, I didn't want to start over. I need to go to 19 seconds. All right, let's go ahead and do that now. There we go.
But today, this app is viewed by many as one of China's newest weapons.
There needs to be a higher level of scrutiny for technology coming out of these adversarial nations.
Virginia Senator Mark Warner is chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. He agreed to talk to Scripps News about his concerns that TikTok is targeting the personal data of an estimated 150 million American TikTok users every day.
So one thing that we have to re-emphasize here is that every single social media app uses user data in order to make money. That is why they're all free. If I were to tackle this problem from an aspect of Congress, what I would do is actually go after that for every single social media company. Not because I trust China, but because this issue is something that we should all care about across all devices. I personally do not have TikTok on my phone. I don't have TikTok on my phone because of the issues being brought up by some of these senators. But that's because I know and because of my prior history with the US government that I don't want to necessarily have my data going to China. What we'll hear later on in the program with the testimony of Chu is that that data is being kind of siloed within the United States. We'll also talk about some of the other things that senators bring up and Congress people and Republicans and Democrats bring up if their fear about Chinese media manipulation. But those media manipulation things exist across, again, all social media. So that's where the angle that I am personally coming from this. But let's go ahead and let him this newscast continue, and we can critique and expand upon it as it goes on.
With all of it ending up in the hands of TikTok's Beijing-based owner, ByteDance.
They have to turn over any information, whenever requested, to the Communist Party. TikTok, ByteDance, their first loyalty has to be by law to the Communist Party.
Mining data is the norm for social media companies.
So the part that he just said about it turning over data to the Chinese government is probably true. That loyalty pledge exists for every single business that operates in China that is a Chinese-based business. There's some wiggle room with that when it comes to subsidiaries and that sort of thing. They do want to be able to allow American, European, Russian, whatever companies, African, it doesn't matter, whatever country it is, to operate within the country and be able to share its knowledge and expertise with China in order to build up China's local economy. So there's some things with that, but these are concerns that actually exist. And I'm actually going to skip this because I've already talked about this part of it when you're talking about social media in general. So let's go ahead and do that.
That is being used by the Chinese government to try to track and influence Americans, even spy on them.
We saw journalists literally being tracked because of their TikTok use. We saw the potential for this to be used as a propaganda tool. I'm not saying they're doing it right now, but I am saying at any moment in time, the Communist Party could say, well, we want to make sure that TikTok users only see videos that are negative about Taiwan or negative about America.
So is it...
So with what he's saying here about the tracking of journalists, this actually did happen, or at least it appears to have happened. The United States intelligence community has reported on this, and some of the journalists themselves have reported on this. And these are journalists that have been critical of Chinese Communist Party, as well as other things, ex-Chinese citizens and the like. These are actual legitimate concerns. But again, I think these concerns go beyond just TikTok. I think these concerns go with social media in general, because social media sells its data to the highest bidder. Now, as far as the propaganda tool is concerned, hold on a second. Sorry about that. Got a frog in my throat. Okay. So as far as the propaganda is concerned, I don't necessarily buy that. And we'll talk about later why.
More concern about the actual technology or about where the technology is coming from?
It's a little bit of both. You could be manipulated by Facebook. You could be manipulated by Google. At the end of the day, they're not responsible to an authoritarian regime that uses technology, frankly, to monitor and surveil its people at an unprecedented level.
All right. So that is all very true. That is all very true. So that's where we're going to clip. We're going to stop off with that, and we're going to continue on now with the copy. So Warren's allegations that TikTok must overturn any information request by the Chinese Communist Party is not borne out by TikTok's CEO, though. We're going to turn now to Chu's opening statement. This is a long clip, but it provides a foundation of knowledge about TikTok's app that corrects some of the widely held beliefs about it. This includes who sits on the board of the directors for the company, where the company's data is stored, things of that nature. Now, again, some of these concerns some of the concerns I believe to be warranted. But again, that's where I'm at with this. And we'll talk more about it after this. So let's go ahead and get back into this testimony. If I can get it. Oh, no, that's not what I want. Hold on a second. Yeah, there we go.
In Virginia. 2 years ago, I became the CEO of TikTok. Today, we have more than 1 billion monthly active users around the world, including over 150 million in the United States. Our app is a place where people can be creative and curious, and where close to 5 million American businesses, mostly small businesses, go to find new customers and to fuel their growth.
Yeah, this is true. So social media is very needed for small businesses because that's where most young people are. Anybody that is below the age of like 35 is not watching anything on cable news. They're skipping ads when it comes to YouTube. They're skipping ads, everything like all this stuff, right? They're doing all that things. And so if people want to reach an audience to sell their products, they have to use social media to do so.
Now, as TikTok has grown, we've tried to learn the lessons of companies that have come before us, especially when it comes to the safety of teenagers. While the vast majority of people on TikTok are over 18.
That's true too.
One of our fastest growing demographics are people over 35.
And that's also true.
We spent a lot of time adopting measures to protect teenagers. Many of those measures are firsts for the social media industry. We forbid direct messaging for people under 16, and we have a 60-minute watch time by default for those under 18.
Okay, so we need to talk about this a little bit. All that might be true, but there is no control mechanism for it. This is an issue with the way the United States handles social media in general for people that are not adults. There is no limits to it, and other countries have implemented limits to it. China being one of them, South Korea being another. Other countries are able to like socialize their kids to stay off the platforms a bit better than we are for various reasons, right? But there's no control mechanism other than a box that you check that says I am over the age of 18, and then you're just allowed to do whatever the hell you want. I believe that's going to change in the United States soon, maybe in the next 5-10 years. Maybe it might take that long, but I don't see this being a thing that stays around for a while, for much longer rather, because of the amount of evidence that is being shown that social media in and of itself is damaging to children with long-term exposure and with access to things like pornography and the like. Changebox, I believe that you have a good point to that. So let me get that on screen. So Changebox says, first glance says that it employs roughly 8,424 employees and revenue is of 450 million. That's not a profitable business. This makes me feel like the real gain is the data. Yes, the real gain is the data. Data is the oil of our times. Just is. And Lola J, yes, I assume that young people were the primary audience. It was at start. So for people that might not know, TikTok actually started as an app called Musical.ly, where young kids basically lip synced videos and things like that. And then it evolved into what it is today. Once the young people jumped on it and started making it popular and people started laughing at the videos that circulated on other media apps such as Facebook and Twitter, then older people started using it a lot as well. So that's why the fastest growing demographic for TikTok users is actually people over the age of 35. Same thing happened with Snapchat. Same thing happened with Instagram. It's what kids found the platform. Other people started gravitating to it because it's fun and new and interesting, exciting. People started to trust it more. And that's where we are today with it. So, but yeah, let's go ahead and let him continue.
We have a suite of family pairing tools so that parents can participate in their teens' experience and make the choices that are right for their family.
And I think TikTok does this just a little bit better than like Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. Well, Twitter I don't think does this at all. So I think that they're not being they're not lying about this. The problem is that is any parent doing it? Probably not. This is why that's why social media regulations need to come from on high about this stuff. And you can see that this person, ranking member Pallone, I don't know where, who he represents. I don't know every single congressional member, but ranking member of him, he is not having it. You can see it on his face. He's like, okay,
TikTok
buddy.
To be a place where teenagers can come to learn, which is why we recently launched a feed that exclusively features educational videos about STEM. STEM videos already have over 116 billion views on TikTok. And I think TikTok is inspiring a new generation to discover a passion for math and science.
This has been actually kind of one of those things that has been true for a lot of social media platforms when they've created these feeds that have been prominently introduced on the main landing page of an app. This happened when Reddit did it, when it represented some boards and stuff that it got a lot more people interested in different things. But you know, this is PR. This is just PR, so I wouldn't say that this is something that should necessarily excuse any of the concerns that we have about TikTok or social media in general. But it does give a little bit of a little wiggle in there.
Would also like to talk about national security concerns that you have raised,
and this is the meat.
very, very seriously. Let me start by addressing a few misconceptions about ByteDance, of which we are a subsidiary. ByteDance is not owned or controlled by the Chinese government. It's a private company. 60% of the company is owned by global institutional investors. 20% is owned by the founder.
So that global institutional investors include sovereign wealth funds of other countries, groups like BlackRock, JP Morgan Chase, probably some venture capital firms that put money into it from, that we just saw with SVB, and the like. It does include it. Well, I can't say that for certain, but it would not surprise me if it included also the Chinese government. But it should be noted that this is one of those things that a lot of countries invest in because they have these sovereign wealth funds that are designed in order to generate more money for their citizens and use for their own country's benefits. You can see this a lot with Denmark and Norway and the other Nordic countries where they have a sovereign wealth fund and they take the profits of that fund and invest it directly into their citizens. Something the United States needs to get on with, but that is true.
And 20% owned by employees around the world. ByteDance has board members.
Let me rewind that a little bit because I talked over it.
Percent owned by employees around the world.
Hold on.
By the Chinese government. It's a private company. 60% of the company is owned by global institutional investors. 20% is owned by the founder, and 20% owned by employees around the world. ByteDance has 5 board members. 3 of them are American. Now, TikTok itself is not available in mainland China.
Okay, so this is a technicality in my opinion. So the TikTok app that we all know about is not, but there is a Chinese version of the app that is available. And I have to look up the exact name. I think it's Daiomo. Daiomo. TikTok. I'm going to look it up real quick. TikTok version China. Let's see. Douyin. Douyin. And Douyin has massive regulations on it. But that is not regulations on it because they're trying to manipulate the United States. But I want to finish up my comments with those, so we'll let them continue. But there does exist a Chinese version of this app, just like there's a Chinese version. Well, I wouldn't say it's a Chinese version, more like a Chinese clone of Twitter and of Facebook. Weimu, Weibo, Chinese Twitter. It's yeah. Anyways, I can't remember the exact name of it right now, but there is a Chinese clone of Twitter because China has the Great Firewall of China that prevents a lot of information from getting into and out of the country to the larger world because they do highly monitor their own people. They just do.
We're headquartered in Los Angeles and in Singapore, and we have 7,000 employees in the US today. Still, we have heard important concerns about the potential for unwanted foreign access to US data and potential manipulation of the TikTok US ecosystem. Our approach has never been to dismiss or trivialize any of these concerns.
So when you're talking about the TikTok US ecosystem, he's talking about propaganda or manipulation of the algorithmic feeds that are not in line with how other companies within the United States operate in that way. The other stuff we talked a little bit about at length previously in this segment, but that's what he's talking about with this particular part of it. Let's go ahead and let him continue.
Address them with real action. Now that's what we've been doing for the last 2 years, building what amounts to a firewall that seals off protected US user data from unauthorized foreign access. The bottom line is this: American data stored on American soil by an American company, overseen by American personnel. We call this initiative Project Texas. That's where Oracle is headquartered. Today, US TikTok data is stored.
I like how they call it Project Texas because, Texas is like come and take it and all that jazz. Like it's very rah, independent. We're the best. And so when you think of when a lot of foreigners think about America, they really do think of Texas and California. It's wild.
By default in Oracle servers. Only vetted personnel operating in a new company called TikTok US Data Security can control access to this data. Now, additionally, we have plans for this company to report to an independent American board with strong security credentials. Now, there's still some work to do. We have legacy US data sitting in our servers in Virginia and in Singapore.
So this legacy US data that he's talking about is data that had existed and was generated and collected and stored prior to the initiative of Project Texas. This is data that isn't as secured and wasn't under the same protocols as this data that they're talking about now that is more recent. I don't know the exact cutoff point between when this project started or when the transition happened, but that is what he's talking about here. So that data is still, I guess, somewhat vulnerable to outside intrusion, but not necessarily at the level that Congress and the neocons are concerned about.
We're deleting those, and we expect that to be complete this year. When that is done, all protected US data will be under the protection of US law and under the control of the US-led security team.
Yeah, the protection under US law, though, that's one of the rub things. I don't think, like, Congress isn't going to talk about it. We talked about it previously, but the United States, when it comes to data and what you can do with it, from a global perspective, is pretty lax. We don't have GDRP, which stands for, I'm going to look it up again. I should know this since I work with data. GDRP. GDRP is General Data Protection Regulation. That is the data regulation that the European Union has. It's where you have the right to be forgotten, how you have the right to access what data a company stores on you. And you can just, if you're a European citizen, if you're a citizen of any European country, you just send them a form letter and you are guaranteed you're supposed to get your data back in a certain amount of time. There's actually you have to do it within a certain time limit or you can be fined sort of situation there. You can also have your the company delete it all, etc., etc. Yeah, that's a thing.
This eliminates the concern that some of you have shared with me that TikTok user data can be subject to Chinese law. This goes further, by the way, than what any other company in our industry have done. We will also provide unprecedented transparency and security for the source code for the TikTok app and recommendation engine.
Now, as far as any other player in the industry is concerned, I don't know if that is exactly true. I can't speak on that. I can say that some other companies that have that have data rules do not necessarily create data rules specifically for individual countries or individual legal regimes. When I worked for a multinational company prior to the one that I work for now, we were able to, we basically followed GDRP because it was easier and cheaper to follow one standard and follow the more strict standard than it was to create different standards for each country in which we operated. With that said, I have read at some points, and I can't confirm this, so take this with a grain of salt like it's a rumor or what have you, that some companies such as Discord do not actually follow GDRP's recommendations and rules. They basically flat out say they refuse to. They would impact their business too much or what have you. So if this company, if ByteDance is not following GDRP, I'm not saying that they do, I'm not saying that they don't. I'm saying if they don't, then that is also of a concern and should be something that is investigated. Let's continue on though.
Third-party validators like Oracle and others will review and validate our source code and algorithms. This will help ensure the integrity of the code that powers what Americans see on our app.
Now, it's the reason to keep bringing up Oracle is because in 2020 there was a push for ByteDance's for the American subsidiary of ByteDance, which is the company that he works for, to be bought by Oracle. A massive deal. I think it was going to be like $1 billion deal or something like that. And so they started structuring some of the stuff to make that deal go forward. And so they're still greatly partnering with Oracle on these things. What they're hoping to do is that they say, hey, we have Americans in charge. We have fail safes here. We have third parties investigating our app code under NDA, stuff like that. that you shouldn't be wanting to ban our platform. You shouldn't want to ban us from the United States. Maybe. I mean, yeah, I'll talk more about that. Well, I do think that if the United States was able to get extra regulations to ensure that that firewall is being maintained, maybe a ban isn't necessarily needed. Just saying. Just saying.
We will further provide access to researchers, which helps them study and monitor our content ecosystem. Now, we believe we are the only company that offers this level of transparency.
I mean, the only company that needs
actions
to.
we take. We have to earn their trust with decisions we make for our company and our products. The potential security, privacy, content manipulation concerns raised about TikTok are really not unique to us. The same.
That's true. The content manipulation issues are not unique to TikTok. This is an issue that is industry-wide. 100% agree with that.
Issues apply to other companies. We believe what's needed are clear, transparent rules that apply broadly to all tech companies.
It's not
Ownership
wrong.
is not at the core of addressing these concerns. Now, as I conclude, there are more than 150 million Americans who love our platform, and we know we have a responsibility to
It's
protect
about half
them,
of the country.
which is why I'm making the following commitments to you and to all our users. Number one, we will keep safety, particularly for teenagers, as a top priority for us. Number two, we will firewall protected US data from unwanted foreign access.
Good.
Number three, TikTok will remain a place for free expression and will not be manipulated by any government. And fourth, we will be transparent and we will give access to third-party independent monitors to remain accountable for our commitments.
Okay. So one of the things that I do want to bring up here, let me go ahead and actually, let me just do it here real quick. So one of the things I do want to bring up here is that that TikTok heater button, and we've reported this on this before, is that TikTok, hold on. Oh, wow. So this is weird. Heater button. There he goes. So this is reported from Forbes. I'm not going to go deep into this, but TikTok has a secret heating button that can make anyone go viral, which basically what happens is what they do. And the article here basically goes over it. I'll go ahead and drop this in chat really quick. Hopefully that gets to y'all. And the article basically says that after a certain number of views, TikTok can look at a video and then the platform itself can go in and push the button and make it pop up on pretty much everyone's feed. I have no reason to believe that other social media companies are not doing this, which means I believe they are doing this. I believe that's how maybe they'll make some of their money. But the idea that nobody has the ability to do this is a little bit of a fib. They said that no government would have the ability to do that, which is probably true. But again, these are why some of these concerns exist. So let's go ahead and continue on with the copy here. So some of tech critics have stated that while TikTok's data collection does raise concerns, its practices are not much different from those of other big tech companies. Quote, holding TikTok and China accountable are steps in the right direction, but doing so without holding other platforms accountable is simply not enough, said the Tech Oversight Project, a technology policy advocacy organization, in a statement. Continuing on, they stated, quote, lawmakers and regulators should use the hearing as an opportunity to re-engage with civil society organizations, non-government organizations, academics, and activists to splash all big tech companies harmful practices. End quote. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about here is with the manipulation part of it. And the reason I want to talk about the manipulation part of it is because this is where a lot of the right wing and other conspiracy minded people, I'm not saying that all right wingers are conspiracy minded, I'm saying that, you know, other conspiracy minded people on the left and right and whatever, like I'm separating these two groups out here. are focusing much of their attention on TikTok. And the reason they're doing that is because of the TikTok, because of the Chinese version of TikTok, Douyin, because of Douyin does not have the same reach and does not have the same free reign that TikTok does in the United States. And conservatives, fighting the culture war that they are, very much think that China is preventing Chinese citizens from seeing the things that are going viral in the United States, while also promoting those things they consider to be quote unquote degenerate into the United States. This is why they are talking about it, because they can't fathom a world that doesn't have some kind of secret over cabal controlling it. They don't understand chaos. They are against chaos. It's one of the founding principles that these people have. They have to have some form of order in order to make sense of the world. So if you have people talking about going through trans care, taking testosterone, taking hormone replacement therapy, and then a bunch of mostly girls being on TikTok talking about mostly trans men on TikTok talking about their hysterectomies or top surgery or what have you, then to these conspiracy-minded people, the fact that that's not happening in China because of Chinese government regulation on all of Chinese society, and the fact that it's blowing up in the United States, it must be a nefarious plot to them. This is outright fucking insane. There is no reason to believe this at all. While the ability to artificially promote narratives on social media is actually a thing, we've seen it. It does happen. People get paid to promote propaganda. All that stuff is true. It happens across all of social media. There's no reason to link that specifically to TikTok and what happens in China. China monitors its citizens highly. A lot of things that a lot of conservatives would like to have happen in the United States when it comes to cultural promotion, when it comes to taking on gay issues, when it comes to taking on trans issues. These things, or even just mindlessly playing video games for hours. These things are not allowed in China because China goes through not just manufacturing consent, like in the sense that we talk about it in the United States with Chomsky and lefties and the like. It is massive censorship, massive social manipulation, massive control on a scale that is unfathomable to many people. It is just on that kind of scale where you can't even go from one town to the next without having your face scanned to know who you are during COVID. So of course the Chinese government is telling the Chinese version of TikTok, don't allow teenagers to use your platform for more than an hour a day, or we're going to close your entire application down and you won't be able to make money anymore. Of course that it's only letting its children see things that are quote unquote socially responsible in the Chinese government's mind, because that is how China operates in general. You don't need a nefarious plot to see these things, to have it happen in the United States. All you have to do is have no regulations whatsoever when it comes to children accessing social media, and then social media just being the bonanza of a free speech, anything goes, libertine type of society that creates the kind of society that we have just in general. You know, with the weird hang-ups that everybody has about a variety of different things, which we can talk about at length in another video. But I hope that I am making the case here that the idea that it is just this mass manipulation of American teenagers in order to like destroy society that has been really, really pushed by a lot of people online. Anti-Chinese people, or anti-Chinese government people, I should say, a lot of neocons that are looking for the next great enemy to fight, is just utter nonsense. Full stop. But with that, this concludes our segment about TikTok and the Chinese government and that hearing that we just heard. So we have other news that we have to talk about. So we're going to now move on to the Senate and talk about train safety, because we can't just talk about the lack of regulations that are going on in social media. We have to talk about the breakdown of American infrastructure that happens on the daily for reasons that we all know: lack of oversight, investment, and regulations. So let's talk about it. So according to the reporting from ABC News, a bipartisan consensus that Congress should act to toughen regulations on railroads emerged yesterday. For the second time, senators heard testimony on the fiery, hazardous train derailment that happened last month on the Ohio-Pennsylvania border. Both Republicans and Democrats on the Senate Commerce Committee peppered Norfolk Southern CEO Alan Shaw with questions about the enhanced safety measures he would support. At times, they aggressively questioned the CEO of one of the nation's largest railroads on what could be done to prevent future derailments like the one that has upended life in Ohio village of East Palestine. Shaw offered support for some safety enhancements, including training for emergency response crews and phasing out older tank car models. But he declined to endorse several key parts of the bipartisan Railway Safety Act of 2023, which is being championed by Ohio Senators Sherrod Brown, a Democrat, and J.D. Vance, a Republican. The bill includes requirements that trains have crews of at least 2 people, expands the classification of highly hazardous flammable trains, and increases fines for safety violations. Of course, the company is not going to be for any of these things. They vented the gas and put it on fire so that trains could still run on time and they could continue to make money despite the disaster which they wrought on an entire community. We've reported on the program previously about the East Palestine derailment. We have said that more information is coming and that the testing that is ongoing for hazardous chemicals in the soil is going to be a thing that we're going to have to look on for months. While the air quality might seem to be good now, we can't talk about the water quality entirely or the soil quality itself, especially if it rained and dropped some of that hazardous chemicals into the ground. Previous sites of massive derailments of trains and other hazardous chemicals from mining operations or what have you have created what they call Superfund sites, which have taken decades to clean and have never gotten the investment that they need from the United States government to make the place livable again. I personally hope that this does not happen with East Palestine. I hope that the EPA, the Transportation Department, the Commerce Department are all correct that it is currently safe to live in East Palestine. But I don't know 100%. I can only trust for right now. And it does not surprise me that people do not trust them on this. We talked about it at length in a previous video, which we will probably publish at some point. But let's continue on. So Democratic Senator Marie Cantwell, chair of the let's restart that. So Democratic Senator Marie Cantwell, chair of the Senate Commerce Committee, said lawmakers have an opportunity to use the horrible accident to really improve rail safety. She predicted a bill would advance to the Senate floor by April. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is also behind the Railway Safety Act. And in the House, a bipartisan group of Ohio lawmakers has also introduced a similar proposal, though top Republicans have also urged caution on enacting fresh regulations. Because of course they do. Now, there could be, maybe we don't need fresh regulations, maybe we just need to enforce the ones we have. But given the fact that they lobbied against improving the braking system, I think we need some fresh regulations. I don't know. That's just me. Call me crazy, but if you have a 18th century braking system that causes problems, maybe you should invest in fixing it And maybe you should be fined because you didn't upgrade to safety standards beforehand. It's ridiculous that this is still a thing. Continuing on, though, the Association of American Railroads trade group, whose CEO, Ian Jeffries, testified Wednesday, says that the railroads are still the safest way to transport hazardous material over land. And despite all that, he's not wrong. Driving across highways is more risky because more things can go wrong because other people are driving. Continuing on, train derailments have also been getting less common, but there's still more than 1,000 last year, according to data from the Federal Railroad Administration. The bill takes sides in a long-running disagreement between railroad worker unions and operators by requiring train crews to continue to have 2 people, although the train that derailed in East Palestine had a 3-person crew. Unions argued that railroads are riskier jobs because cuts in the industry over the last 6 years. Nearly 1/3 of all rail jobs were eliminated, and train crews, they said, are fatigued under pressure to perform safety inspections in a matter of seconds. You can have all the regulations you want in the world. If you don't have the personnel to enforce them, corners get cut, people cheat, and the thing goes on, and over time increases risk for air. Shaw was also pressed to support a 2-person requirement for crews, but declined. Instead, he said, quote, "We are a data-driven organization, and I am not aware of any data that links crew size with safety." Okay. I'm a data guy. Let's explain this a little bit, okay? Because this is frustrating. There might not be a large link between crew size and train derailments, because train derailments are, even though they are fairly common, are probably still a fairly rare occurrence. 1,000 a year sounds like a lot, but if you have 2 million trains going across the country every year, it's not a whole lot. The point isn't to be to increase the efficacy of your train safety on a mass scale, because that is not really what 2 people are going to do. What can happen when you have more people on a crew is that in the rare circumstances that a train derailment happens, or a train derailment event, or a train derailing causing event rather happens, you have more people on hand to potentially catch it and stop it before it happens. Whether or not that increases the cost to the train company beyond the mere, rounding error, I don't know. But that is why this appeal to data-driven decisions is nonsense, because we're talking about the safety of communities and people in the hundreds of thousands in many cases. If it costs a little bit more to increase the safety, so be it. Honestly. Their train companies are working skeleton crews to make them the most efficient thing that they can. That also increases the cost for air. And these are things that we should not abide by. For their part, senators pushing the new safety requirement, like Ohio's Brown, argued Shaw's stance is emblematic of an industry that is putting efficiency and profits over safety, like we just said. Quote, "Railroads want only 1 person working on a train, and that is 2 or 3 miles long. That is frankly crazy." And it is incredibly accurate that it's crazy for that. How can a person on a train that's 3 miles long see even potentially catch any of the errors, right? You don't want it. One, the company doesn't want to invest in people. Okay. They don't also want to invest in things that would make it more efficient and safer because it costs more money. They don't want to replace their brake systems. Like, come on. They don't want to do these things. It's fucking stupid. The committee is also looking at possible changes to regulations that don't classify trains as highly hazardous flammable. Excuse me. Let me reread that. So the committee is also looking at possible changes to regulations that don't classified trains as highly hazardous flammable, as long as they fall under certain thresholds for the number of rail cars carrying combustible liquids. Now, this is another thing, right? So the reason why they had these regulations and the industry really pushed to not have certain trains classified as this is because they would require more crew, more safety inspections, more changes to the rail system in order to the rail cars in order to do the braking, etc., increasing the cost, right? They don't want to increase the cost. Fine. I don't care. Increase the cost. Eat it. Pass it on. This is something that just shouldn't happen, honestly. Like, you shouldn't be using a braking system from the 1880s, given that, like, it helps increase the likelihood of a derailment. Especially if you're not investing in tracks, a lot of them private, to keep them maintained and going. And they lobbied against it because it would cost them a few million dollars in profit a year, and a 250 plus million plus profits a year. It's ridiculous. It's freaking ridiculous. And lawmakers are also examining how local authorities are informed by rail operators about what trains are carrying. Like, honestly, if you're carrying a single tanker of highly flammable material that's carcinogenic, you should be regulated as a highly flammable material train. Like, you should have to inform the community you are driving through that you're like, hey, we got this, our train, this train here, this giant train has 2 cars of ethyl chloride used in the manufacture of vinyl, and that stuff's cancerous, so you might need to know about it. Just a heads up. So, like, a fire department can be on notice that that's happening, just so in case if it does happen, they can be quickly there if it goes over. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous. But, my friends, that concludes our segment about the train and the hearings in Norfolk Southern. We're going to continue on. We got more news coming from the Senate, and this time it's talking about authorization for the use of force for specifically the war on terror. So, turning again to ABC News reporting, the Senate voted overwhelmingly yesterday to continue congressional authorization for the use of force in the global fight against terror. The vote turned back an effort by Kentucky Senator Rand Paul to repeal the 2001 measure. Republicans rejected the amendment 86-9. Or, I'm sorry, Republicans. Let me say that again. Edit that bit. Senators rejected the amendment 86-9 as they are debating a separate repeal of 2 authorizations of military force in Iraq. There is broad bipartisan support to withdraw congressional approval granted in 1991 and 2002 for military strikes against Saddam Hussein's regime. Passed in September of 2001, it's still used to this day to justify U.S. military action against terror groups, including Al-Qaeda and its affiliates such as ISIS and Al-Shabaab, that are deemed to be threats against America. All heinous groups. Boko Haram is another one. These are all terrible, murdery, evil, vile, disgusting groups of people, and I am okay with the United States helping other countries combat them. Yeah, I said it. The 2002 measure, though, that launched the invasion of the Iraq war 20 years ago, this week, has been used much less frequently, and supporters of repealing it say that it is vulnerable to abuse. President Joe Biden has said he supports that repeal. Senators in both parties said they might be open to eventually replacing the 2001 authorization for the war on terror and narrowing its authority, but they argued that it should not be fully repealed. Quote, "We have not yet had this substantive discussion," said Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Bob Mendez, Democrat of New Jersey, ahead of the amendment vote. Paul said that by repealing only the Iraq authorization, Congress is, quote, "missing the point since Hussein's regime no longer exists. By leaving the 2001 measure in place, Congress is keeping the authorization that approves war everywhere, all times," he said. He's not wrong. He is not wrong. Maybe we should sunset these kind of maybe we should sunset these authorizations for military force, because if they go on forever, they can be exploited by every president for all of time to do police actions that have been quasi-approved by Congress. I approve the efforts here in order to take back congressional control over the declaration of war. Just because we don't call it a war doesn't mean it's not a war, and Congress needs to reassert its authority. I agree with Rand Paul on this issue to a degree. I think that there should be a reauthorization of it, and it should have to reauthorized, I don't know, every 4 years or something, whatever. Like, I don't think it should just sunset and they have to reauthorize it, but there should be like a vote of like no confidence or something in it, some sort of measure to reassert congressional control over war powers. Now, continuing on, the Senate is expected to vote next week to repeal the 2 Iraq measures. It's unclear whether leaders in Republican-controlled House will bring the bill up for a vote, even if it does pass the Senate. But McCarthy signaled this week that he's open to supporting the measure. House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Michael McCaul, Republican of Texas, said he's interested in replacing the 2 Iraq authorizations instead of just repealing them, a move that is unlikely to have support in the Senate. Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, the lead Democrat author of the Senate bill to repeal the Iraq authorization, said he believes bipartisan support in the House could move votes. Noting McCarthy's new openness, he said he views the House as getting better and better every day on this issue. So, there is not a large wing of the Republican Party that is pro anti-war, but given how divided Congress is, maybe some of these things could pass. The 2 Iraq ones specifically, I could see having majority of Democrat support and possibly up to 40 or so detractors from Republicans should Republicans be the vast majority of people that bulk at removing these war powers. We are in a strange time when it comes to a support for war. This isn't a Democrat versus Republican thing. This is more, neocon / liberal democratic world order versus nationalist, populist, anti-war people. It runs the gamut as far as American political system is concerned. So that should be stated there as well. But I appreciate it. So, but that, my friends, concludes this segment of the newscast. And Lola J, hey, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I do try. Thank you. Thank you for saying I'm great at this and for saying I should pursue a career. Well, I am being paid very well by my current job, but if this could replace it, that would be awesome. Appreciate your love. Thank you very much. All right. So yeah, we still got some time. So a little update about Mitch McConnell here. So while reporting on Minority Leader Mitch McConnell's prognosis remains scarce, allies of the... Let me restate this. So Mitch McConnell, as people might know, has been hospitalized for a fall he had last week. And so we have some little bit of updates about that. So while reporting on Minority Leader Mitch McConnell's prognosis remains scarce, allies of the Kentucky Republican say they have spoken to him briefly and that he is chomping at the bit to return to work. McConnell fell at D.C. restaurant on March 8th, reportedly suffering a minor concussion and slightly fractured rib. 2 weeks ago, not last week. After spending 5 days in the hospital, the 81-year-old senator was admitted to the private rehab facility where he remains today. It's thought he will return to the Senate by mid-April. And so there's that. Okay. Let me get some water. Oh, no, Jack and Art, I appreciate you too, buddy. Appreciate you too. No, man, you're yeah, that's fine. Here, we'll get that on. That's fine. So, this is actually an announcement I forgot to make. So, Jack and Art, thank you for coming over and watching the show. Appreciate it, everybody. So, he says, oh, I see how it is, Cypher. Just gloss over to follow Interlurker. I will make sure you pay for that during the next debate. Well, that next debate will be happening on Saturday on the Tiberius D Saturday Night Lights debate show. That happens at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it goes for roughly 2 hours. There's an after show of that after that. I might be around for 3 hours of that. I'm going to be there for the whole program, so whenever the program ends, and I'll be able to stay around for a bit longer to talk to the audience and that sort of stuff, but I do have plans that night. So I'll be going out after the show to do some stuff. But yeah, so be sure to check that out this Saturday on Tiberius's show. And if you don't catch it on his show, you can catch it on his channel or our channel on YouTube in the coming weeks after that is done. So yeah, thank you. Oh man, it's bad allergies today. Hold on a second. All right, let's go ahead and continue on. And we got some news from the Biden administration. It's not much, so we'll get through it quickly, but let's go ahead and get into it here. So here's what we got first. The first thing is that the president used his veto power to block a new investment rule passed by Congress, according to reporting from the NBC News. In the first veto as president, Biden rejected a bipartisan measure that would nullify a new administration rule for retirement plans. Quote, "This bill would risk your retirement savings by making it illegal to consider risk factors MAGA House Republicans don't like," Biden said on Twitter on Monday. Continuing on, he quoted sayings that such as, "Your plan manager should be able to protect your hard-earned savings, whether Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene likes it or not." Good dag on there on MTG. Now, this rule is basically stated that retirement plans could not take into account ESG, environment, social, governance actions into their investment portfolios. Because fiduciarily speaking, at least according to some people, considering those things isn't what they should be doing. They should be only looking strictly at profits. Now, the primary reason that this is happening, in my opinion, is the fact that these companies, these investment firms, are not investing as much as they once did. They're still investing, just not as much. Well, substantially not as much, I should say. Give it a little credit. Into oil and gas exploration and refinement companies because of climate change. And so these retirement funds are looking at the reality of climate change and deciding that investing in a company long term, which is what these retirement funds are supposed to do, isn't actually a good option, and that they should look for alternatives to oil and gas in order to keep their assets safe and the people that they represent. So that's why this is happening. Now, the veto comes after the Senate voted 50-46 earlier this month on a resolution to block a Labor Department rule that allows for certain retirement plans to weigh environmental, social, and corporate governance factors, ESG, when selecting investments. In the Senate vote, Democratic Senators Joe Manchin of West Virginia and John Tester of Montana joined Republicans to pass the measure, both big gas states. The House passed its February 28th in a 216-204 vote, with Representative Jared Golden of Maine bucking his party to vote with Republicans. A 2/3 majority is needed in each chamber to override a veto. Clearly not going to happen. Republican Representative Andy Barr of Kentucky introduced the measure in February, about 2 months after the Labor Department issued the investment rule. Excuse me. Following the Senate vote, Barr tweeted, quote, "President Biden should abandon the radical climate activists and join us in putting middle-class savers ahead of politics." Sure. What you're really talking about is the companies that line your pocket. So in a statement on administration policy before Congress voted, the White House warned that Biden would veto the resolution if it were to reach his desk. Quote, "The 2022 Biden-Harris administration rule makes clear that fiduciaries can consider factors such as corporate accountability and transparency, climate, and liability risk if they find them relevant to the analysis of investment risk and return, in the same way that they would prudently consider other relevant factors," the White House said. Biden's veto comes in a newly divided Congress after 2 years of unified Democratic control. Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat of West Virginia, was one of 2 Senate Democrats to vote with the Republicans to attempt to nullify the proposed Department of Labor rule. He issued a heated statement Monday condemning the Biden administration for, in his view, prioritizing politics over securing the best financial returns for Americans, according to Politico. Quote, the administration continues to prioritize the radical policy agenda over the economic, energy, and national security needs of our country. And it is absolutely infuriating. I can't do Manchin's voice. I'll get it eventually, Manchin said. Continuing on, he stated, quote, West Virginians are under increasing stress as we continue to recover from a once-in-a-generation pandemic, pay the bills amid record inflation, and face the largest land war in Europe since World War II. The administration's unrelenting campaign to advance a radical social and environmental agenda is only exacerbating these challenges. End quote. Now, many retirement funds will not invest with hedges that support oil and gas. Yes, true, Jack and Ard. Very much true. And Loyola, didn't mean to click on that. And Loyola J says it's all about the monies. And it is. Even for Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin is an oil guy. In fact, if I were to go to Google right now, I can get a quote of him saying just that. Like we reported on previously in one of our segments called, I think it's called the Koch's Man in Virginia is what the episode's called. And Joe Manchin is very much wedded to oil and gas and natural resource exploitation because he owns coal companies. And in order to get his vote on many things, he had to be bought off with protection of coal companies and the like. So when he talks about radical climate activists and exacerbating these challenges, what he's really talking about is his bottom line. And as Jack and Ard painting says, and if I can get it up here, if I get the right thing, Manchin, yes, my friend, Manchin is a shit stain. But that concludes our segment on Joe Manchin and this whole rigmarole about ESG financing. And last up, we have COVID origins legislation. So we'll close out this segment of the news roundup with the news that the president signed a Republican-sponsored bill ordering the declassification of information related to the origins of COVID-19. The bill had moved quickly through the House and Senate without opposition. The legislation requires the Director of National Intelligence to release the information within 90 days. The government can withhold intelligence to protect how it was collected. Quote, I share the Congress's goal of releasing as much information as possible about the origins of coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19, Biden said in a statement. We need to get to the bottom of COVID-19's origins to help ensure we can better prevent future pandemics. The legislation applies only to materials related to the Wuhan Institute of Virology as a potential source of COVID, a politically charged issue. And one that we have talked about so much on this program. I am of the opinion that right now we cannot say with 100% certainty which way the virus came from, whether it was manufactured, enhanced, whatever, or whether it was natural. Now, we can't say with certainty, but I personally lean that it was a natural occurring virus. And more evidence comes out by the month that suggests that is the case. And while the government has different opinions about that through its different departments, the majority of the government's departments say that still lean that it was a naturally occurring virus. And the ones that don't really lean heavily upon the fact that China has not been forthcoming with its help on this issue, because there's no incentive for them to do so. If you're going to tell them if regardless of what's found, we're going to hold you accountable. This is where national politics, real politics, comes into play. And it's one of those things where I personally believe that we should tell We should basically tell China that, like, we want to know the truth so that we can stop it from happening in the future, regardless of it, and regardless of what we find, we're not going to do anything, because really, that will get to the bottom of it. Because what they fear is the world basically seeking reparations for an accident. If it was an accident. If we take that off the table, then there is no reason to hide the information at all. And I don't believe they're hiding information when it comes to that, personally. But that removes the sword of Damocles over it and actually increases the likelihood of them working with us, with the world, directly, transparently on this issue. So that's where I'm at with that. So yeah, that concludes our segment about Biden. So SCOTUS updates. Just one update for the SCOTUS this week in the case of a deaf student who brought an administrative complaint to the court. Here is the SCOTUS blog on TikTok to explain the case and the opinion. And the reason that we do TikTok is, well, because the SCOTUS blog, is because SCOTUS blog really does the best at this. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Today, the Supreme Court ruled for a deaf student in Michigan. In its only opinion this week, Justice Neil Gorsuch, writing for a unanimous court, revived Miguel Luna Perez's lawsuit against a Michigan school district. Perez is now 24, but attended Sturgis Public Schools for 11 years and said during that time, they failed to provide him with a sign language interpreter, or they gave him one that was absent all the time. He filed an administrative complaint saying,
so this should be obviously against the law, the ADA, because if you don't have a school of the deaf, you're not providing equal opportunity to be embedded within society and make yourself that sort of thing. Like it doesn't. No wonder this is unanimous. Like everybody can see that this is clearly in violation of the law.
Saying that the school district violated the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Yeah,
now, the district settled the IDEA claim before the Department of Education could hear it. Then Perez sued in federal courts under the ADA.
Good.
Now, the school district argued that Perez's suit should not be allowed to go to court because of something called the exhaustion requirement under the IDEA, which essentially means that someone who wants to file a lawsuit has to exhaust all of the administrative remedies that are available to them before they can go to court. And here,
this is ridiculous. I hate these kind of rules. Basically, it gives the government tips the scale a little bit in the government's favor. And the reason why I say that it does that is because if you get stuck at one part of the administrative backlog and they're like, well, we haven't gotten to your case yet, you can't exhaust it in any reasonable amount of time because they can just sandbag you. It's fucking stupid.
Here, that would include a hearing before an administrative hearing officer. And the district actually got both lower courts to agree with him. But today, the Supreme Court unanimously disagreed and reversed. Justice Gorsuch, writing for a unanimous court, said the IDEA exhaustion requirement only applies when the person who is filing the lawsuit, here Perez, is seeking a remedy that the IDEA also provides. Here, Perez wanted compensatory damages, cash monies for his emotional suffering and his income loss.
I mean, all fair, honestly. Yeah, like for real. Like this is a not a rare, but this is an example of justice for a person with disabilities. Now, they agreed to let the lawsuit continue. They didn't agree with him one way or the other about that lawsuit. So this is still going to have a little bit of legal hurdles to go through.
That's not a remedy available under the IDEA. So the exhaustion requirement doesn't apply, and Perez's ADA suit is allowed to go forward in federal court.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't really agree with the exhaustion requirement anyways. I think it's pretty scuzzy, but that's where that's at. So, yeah. All right. So now, the moment you've all been waiting for. In a world where the orange man is bad Yes, my friends, we are going to be talking about the recent legal troubles that Trump has experienced. We don't got them yet. I'm not doing the whole John Oliver thing. I'm sorry. So we're not doing that yet. But jokes aside, we do have to report about what those legal woes are and maybe some analysis with them as well. So let's get into it. So the former president's various legal issues have coalesced this week as he posted increasingly angry and desperate pleas on social media apps. In all, 4 different investigations have gathered momentum pretty much all at the same time. Let's turn first to the Hill's reporting on the status of various investigations. It was a busy morning on social media for Trump, which he capped with a post suggesting that the leads of 4 different investigations into his conduct be removed from their post. Trump's comments follow significant advances in each investigation. Let me reread that. Trump's comments follow significant advances in each investigation. Now, I am going to try to do my best voice of Trump here, okay? Please bear with me. And we're going to do hands. All right. We're going to try this. All right. District Attorney Bragg is danger to our country and should be removed immediately, along with radical lunatic bomb thrower Jack Smith, who is harassing and intimidating innocent people at levels not seen before. Get Trump, Letitia James, the absolute worst attorney general in the United States, and Atlanta DA Vance Weiss, who is I can't do it anymore. I'm sorry. I tried. I tried. Who is trying to make a perfect phone call into a plan to destroy America, but reigns over the most violent crime scene in America and does nothing about it. Trump wrote in a post on his social media site. It sounded like I mean, hey, you know what? I'll take it. I sounded like Trump on helium. All right, I'll take it though. I'll take it. Continuing on though. In Manhattan, a grand jury has been investigating whether Trump broke the law in an organization and concealing a $130,000 hush payment to adult film star Stormy Daniels. More on this in a moment. Special counsel Jack Smith, who is overseeing an investigation into the mishandling of records at Mar-a-Lago, as well as the effort to stop the transition of power after the 2020 election, also just scored a major court victory. An appeals court backed a lower court ruling, ordering Trump's attorney in the Mar-a-Lago probe, Evan Coronan, to turn over documents and transcripts of calls to prosecutors. The documents Corcoran was ordered to disclose apparently included attorney notes of conversations between Corcoran and Trump, as well as an audio file. Few, if any, appellate rulings have even come more swiftly than Wednesday's. It was only last Friday that the district court Judge Beryl Howell, it was only last Friday the district court Judge Beryl Howell ordered Corcoran to hand over his notes and documents. In closed-door hearings before Judge Howell, Smith had evidently provided enough evidence to convince her that Corcoran's communications with Trump and his notes of them included planning or concealing a crime. That allowed her to make the crime fraud exception to cut through the confidentiality of attorney-client communications with a determination that the communications are not privileged since they may have occurred in furtherance of the crime. In other words, if you ask your lawyer how you can break the law legally or as legally as possible, that is no longer considered attorney-client privileges. You can admit to committing a crime to your attorney, and they are not allowed to turn that over. But if you ask them for advice about furthering committing a crime and they give it to you, you become accessory after the fact. So yeah, that's where we're at with this. So unless Trump appeals the ruling to the Supreme Court, which it doesn't look like he will do, Evan Corcoran is expected to testify tomorrow. New York Attorney General Letitia James has brought a civil fraud suit against Trump as well. Efforts by Trump's team to delay this case for 6 months do not appear likely to succeed. And why does he want to delay it by 6 months? Let's see. We're in March. We go into September. The entire Republican primary starts, and then it can be used as political fodder, and then also maybe make people think twice about trying to ham up somebody that's currently running for president. The goal of Trump in every single legal dispute he's ever had is delay, and hopefully you delay it so much that the other party runs out of money and they can't continue anymore. His problem, though, is that he's targeted governments, and they don't run out of money as quickly as random people. So, yeah. So that's good. Continuing on, though, court documents filed earlier this month indicated that Judge Arthur Engoron, Judge Arthur Engoron, who is overseeing the case, told the parties during a recent proceeding that the trial would start as scheduled on October 2nd, come hell or high water. And Trump's Georgia-based legal team on Monday sought to quash an investigation led by Fulton County District Attorney Fani Weiss into his efforts to influence the 2020 election. This one is the big case that you have heard about forever, and another tape was found. Oh God, they just keep the hits. They keep on coming, and they don't stop coming. Anyways, didn't L shape on his forehead. Hopefully. Anyways, continuing on. It is not clear if Trump will be charged in connection with the Georgia probe, but the move comes after jurors who served on the special purpose grand jury said in its final report suggested charges for numerous people connected with Trump's scheme should be done. Now, we got the hush money. So the Manhattan case is expected to move forward this week. You may remember the hush money case from 2016, shortly before the election. Ultimately, the payment resulted in then-Trump lawyer Michael Cohen going to prison for tax evasion and campaign finance violations. When the case was brought against Cohen, Trump was the sitting president. A DOJ rule prevented legal action against a sitting president. Michael Cohen is expected to be a star witness in the Manhattan case, which involves a misdemeanor that could be related to a felony. To quickly recap this case, Trump made the payment to Daniels using Cohen as a middleman. Cohen took out a home equity loan in order to pay the actress $130,000 in return for her not speaking to the press about an affair she had with Trump. The payment occurred close in time to the 2016 election. Based on reporting and interviews with Trump surrogates, the grand jury is posed now to hand down an indictment in that case. Trump himself broadcast the expected indictment last weekend, saying that he would be, quote, arrested on Tuesday and calling for his followers to take back our country and protest. Tuesday came and went without an announcement from the DA, but activity in New York City does seem to point to a grand jury indictment happening soon-ish. Barriers being erected, talks with the local police and general police, talks with the Secret Service. These things lead to the idea that a grand jury indictment is forthcoming. Now, again, I'm not going to say I'm not John Oliver, all right? I'm not making that mistake. We're not doing that again. But expect a funny video when it does happen, or if it happens, rather. This case, however, is far from an open and shut case, though. The New York Times did an in-depth analysis of this case just yesterday. This reporting is based on that analysis. So the district attorney, Alvin Bragg, may have to pull off a difficult maneuver connecting the hush money cover-up, a potential violation of state law, to a federal election. As a general note, the details of any indictment are not yet known, and Bragg could charge any number of crimes. But there is a possibility that the case will rely on a legal theory that has never been elevated by a judge, or evaluated rather. But this is a possibility that the case will rely on a legal theory that has never been evaluated by a judge. A New York Times review and interviews with election law experts strongly suggest that the New York State prosecutors have never before filed an election law case involving a federal campaign. Bringing an untested case against anyone, let alone a former president of the United States, carries the risk that a court could throw out or narrow the case. This case could hinge on the way Trump and his company, the Trump Organization, handled reimbursing Cohen for the payment of $130,000 to Daniels. Trump paid the money back over time in checks from his business and declared the payments as legal fees, which concealed the purpose of the payments. In New York, falsifying business records can be a crime, and Bragg's office is likely to build the case around that charge. The false business records charge is the bread and butter of the district attorney's office white-collar practice. Since Mr. Bragg took office in 2022, prosecutors have filed 111 felony counts of the charges against 29 individuals and companies, according to data kept by the office. Hey man, we need more white-collar crime prosecuted. This is really good. This is real good. But for falsifying business records to be a felony, Bragg's prosecutors must show that Trump's intent to defraud included an intent to commit or conceal a second crime. That crime could be a violation of election law, under the theory that the payout served as a donation to Trump's campaign because it silenced Daniels and shut down a potential sex scandal in the final stretch of the campaign. Trump's October surprise. Trump's lawyers have said that the theory that the money amounted to a campaign donation is fatally flawed. One of the lawyers recently argued in television interviews that Trump approved the payment to protect his family from false accusations, noting that Trump has long denied a sexual encounter with Daniels. Now, come on, man. They totally boned. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that they did the nasty. Now, what should be said here, though, is that this legal theory, this legal defense, has a high possibility of working. It really does. Don't expect this case to be the one that gets Trump, is all I'm saying. Going over to the comments real quick to make sure I'm not missing anything pertinent. Nope, not yet. All right, cool. So whether hush money can amount to campaign donations is not settled law. The text of New York election law defines a campaign contribution in part as, quote, anything of value made in connection with an election. If Bragg's office uses a federal election violation as the second crime, Trump's lawyers could argue that the federal law has no place in state court, which they might be true, honestly. And if the DA uses a New York election law violation, defense could claim that the violation of a state law does not apply to a federal election, in this case, the 2020 presidential campaign. Murky gray area of law here, people. Now, it appears that Bragg's prosecutors are leaning towards using a state election law violation. New York state prosecutors have secured at least one conviction in a case in which they combined falsifying business records charges with state election law crimes, but that case involved a state election and not a federal one. There are several state election laws provisions that appear to fit Cohen and Trump's conduct, according to other legal experts. One, State Election Law 14-126, makes it unlawful for someone, Trump under this theory, to knowingly and willingly solicit another person, Cohen, to spend money in order to evade campaign contribution limits, $130,000 in hush money, well above the legal limit. Another, State Election Law 17-152, proposed as an option by analysts at Just Security and legal commenter Lisa Rubin, is even simpler. Quote, it makes it illegal to conspire to promote the election of any candidate by unlawful means. Despite the daily indictment watch that began after Trump's announced his imminent arrest, signs do seem to indicate that an indictment is on the horizon. It was reported last week that prosecutors met with Trump's attorney, Joe Tacopina, to discuss the details of the former president's surrender. This week, barriers were erected around the Manhattan courthouse, where the arraignment would take place. And on Tuesday, the NYPD announced that all officers, regardless of rank, are required to patrol in uniform and to prepare for deployment if or when an indictment is announced. Law enforcement across the country have also prepared for the potential backlash of Trump supporters should he be charged. Anonymous law enforcement officials have said that the arraignment is unlikely until next week, though. The delay could be due to having a final witness testify, or it could be the result of security issues. I lean to the latter. On Tuesday, award-winning reporter Carol Leoni said law enforcement agencies are investigating chilling threats, including against Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. Quote, I have received copies and screenshots and internal documents and emails flagging concerns about specific protests, investigations into specific online threats that have been made that are not yet determined to be credible and likely to occur, but have been chilling nonetheless in terms of the threats that have been made about killing certain people, said Leoni, a Pulitzer Prize winning author on MSNBC's Deadline White House. Despite Trump's repeated calls for his supporters to protest, no more than a handful have shown up, including in Manhattan, in a parking lot of an In-N-Out Burger in Los Angeles, and outside of Mar-a-Lago. I think the amount of people that are super wedded to Trump is starting to dissipate, but he still has a large amount of... Oh, sorry. I accidentally hit a button on my computer. So, as I was saying, it does appear that the large amount of people that Trump has completely wedded to him has been diminished. But he still has an immense amount of sway over the Republican Party, which is evident by the polling numbers and where the Republican Party is and what they are doing in regards to January 6th and other things of that nature. So yeah, be sure to be on the lookout for that, and we will be sure to report on it when it happens, if it happens, on this program on a Thursday. But with that, that concludes, my friends, that concludes our segment about the legal troubles that Trump found himself in this past week. All right. So now we need to talk about the economy. But before we get into the economy, let me make sure that I didn't miss any great comments from the audience here. All right, let's see. I sounded like Trump on helium. Got that one in. So, tan beds are burning things and they make a fiery ring. Crisp like a deep fryer. I fell into a ring of fire. Oh, that's cool. Lola J, are you a poet? Okay, this one's funny. I fell into a burning ring of fire. I went bronze, 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 and the shades went higher, and it burns, 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 the ring of fire, tan bed of fire. That's funny. That's a good old, oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, fuck. I know the singer. I can't think of him right now. Johnny Cash. There we go. Got it. That's good. Oh, man, that's awesome. For the record... Okay, so Jack and Ard said, for the record, with this being true of Trump, he and Eminem have slept with the same woman. Oh, that's great. All right, man, I love that. That's cool. All right. All right, so we need to get now into the economy. So let's go ahead and talk about what's going on in the wider economy. After this program, or sometime tomorrow, we will be publishing our report from last week about SVB with some additional information tacked into it that we did not have at the time. And so, yeah, we will be talking about that on that clip. But now we are going to talk about Fed rate hikes. So let's get into it. According to Reuters, the Federal Reserve raised interest rates yesterday by 0.25 percentage point, 0.25. Fed Chair Jerome Powell sought to reassure investors about the soundness of the banking system, saying that the management of Silicon Valley Bank failed badly, but the bank's collapse didn't indicate any wider weaknesses in the general banking system. Quote, "These are not weaknesses that are running broadly throughout the banking system," he said, adding that the takeover of Credit Suisse seemed to have been a positive outcome. The Federal Open Market Committee policy statement also said that the U.S. banking system is, quote, "sound and resilient." Even so, Wall Street ended sharply lower yesterday after Powell told a news conference that officials were still intent on fighting inflation, while also eyeing the extent to which recent bank failures had cooled demand and slowed lending. We have been predicting on this program since March that we would see disinflation start in July of last year. So talking March of last year, July of last year, and we are seeing disinflation. We also said on this program multiple times that we were worried that the Federal Reserve's tightening policy would ratchet up and get us into stagflation by triggering an economic recession while inflation is going. We were concerned that that would happen if Fed continued to raise rates beyond what they just raised them to, or much beyond what they raised them to. I had predicted previously that the Federal Reserve would likely keep interest rates at roughly, once getting there, at roughly anywhere between 4.57% and 5%, with the possibility of going up to as high as 5.5%. I said that we would see the Federal Reserve this month do rate interest increases by 0.25 percentage point. So far, I think I've been pretty accurate in my predictions. But I am still worried that the Federal Reserve is going to continue tightening us into the year because they are concerned about inflation, despite the fact that disinflation has been happening for a while now. Disinflation, not deflation. Disinflation is the slowdown of inflation rates. The Federal Reserve does not want to see deflation. They want to see inflation at a moderate level. So right now, what we're seeing is, let me go ahead and pull that up. I believe we're at roughly 6% year over year. And 6%. But let's find out. Year over year inflation chart. Make sure this is month over month. Here we go. And then no. We need this. No, not this chart. Where is it? Here it is. Y charts. Y charts should be. Yeah, as of February 28th of 2023, we have not gotten March's data yet. March will not come out until next month. It was at 6.04%, and it was at a high of last June of 9.06%. And it's been trending down ever since. And I'll go ahead and move over to the chart now so that you can see that here. So as you can see, this was what year over year inflation was. I said June, July timeframe, we would see a decrease. There's July, and then it's been going down ever since. So that's the trajectory we're on with inflation. Whether or not the Federal Reserve needs to keep tightening inflation, or tightening interest rates rather, is still a little bit of a murky issue. Now, with that said, in a key shift driven, partly, at least that's what people are saying, by the sudden failures this month of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, the Fed's latest policy statement no longer says that ongoing increases in rates will likely be appropriate. So, what this means? What this means is that, generally speaking, what a lot of analysts have been saying, and I tend to agree with, is that the Federal Reserve will do something to fight a problem until it starts to break things. And then once it starts to break things, it will stop doing what it was doing and possibly reverse course. I don't see them reversing course yet. I think that what we're going to see is a pause in increasing of rates. We might see another 0.25% increase, 1 or 2, maybe 3 increases, but I do not see it much beyond that. So hopefully we won't see it interest rates go beyond 5.5% at the federal interest rate level. And then if that is the case and we have that pause, that's going to let the market fully readjust to the interest rates the Fed has set, and also give it time to give the Fed a little bit of wiggle room to cut rates drastically and quickly to gin up the economy during a recession. It is my opinion that the Fed targets anywhere between 4.5% and 6% inflation, or not inflation rates, 4.5% to 6% interest rates at the Fed level in order to have enough room to reduce a massive amount of interest rates over a long period of time to get to 1 to 2% at the federal interest rate target without going to 0. Now, I know that in technical terms that 0% interest rates is what we did in real terms during the 2008 recession. But the official rate was between 1 and 2% at that time. That's where we are. Hey, Bisky. Welcome into the show. We'll be finishing up soon, but we're talking about the economy right now. Glad for you to join us. Speaking about other economic news, let's go ahead and continue with some stocks and labor. So according to Market Insider, U.S. stocks jumped today as the U.S. labor market continued to show signs of resilience despite ongoing rate hikes from the Federal Reserve and the recent banking crisis. Weekly jobs claims fell 1,000 from the prior week to $191,000, below consensus estimates of $197,000. The strength in the labor market continues even as high paying and high profile. Let me go over it again. So the strength in the labor market continues even as high profile and high paying tech companies like Amazon and Meta platforms announces further and steep job cuts. Thursday's stock market gains helped ease some of the losses sparked by U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on Wednesday, in which she told Congress that the blanket FDIC insurance coverage for all banks is not something that we have looked at in any way. Now, let's talk about this here a little bit. So part of the reason why we're seeing this much of a robust labor market is because of COVID. It's because millions of people died. Estimates put the level of death up to around 1.5 million people died from COVID. Now, the majority of those people that died from COVID were older folks, but roughly 15% or so of that 1.5 million people did die of working age, and they were concentrated in the age demographic of 40 to 62. So what does that mean? So 105 times 0.15, that means 225,000 people are no longer in the labor market because of COVID directly. Anywhere between, anywhere between, it's estimated that it's a big estimate, it's about 2 million to 6 million people are out of the labor market because of long COVID. Long COVID has eliminated those people out of the job market. So you're looking at, we can split the difference here, roughly 3 million people no longer in the market, in the labor market, that would have been from the United States itself. Combine that with the amount of people that didn't enter the country due to COVID, due to our immigration policy, due to our tough stance under Trump with illegal immigration, and you have you have another 3 or 4 million people that would have been in the labor market, not in the labor market. So that's like almost 10 million people, 10 million fewer people in the labor market. That's going to increase a lot of wages. That's going to make a lot of jobs be possible. On the other side of that, we're starting to insource more because we're decoupling with China due to concerns about the Chinese government, due to concerns about the supply chain that were exposed during COVID, due to neocon policy and etc. So that is what we're seeing here. And those are having real impacts on the labor market and giving us a bit of a boost when it comes to the ability for us to keep our jobs and make more money from them. And that's what happens pretty much after every pandemic, is that there is a boost in the labor power because it reveals how much labor is valued. So it resets people's expectations of what they can command as far as their ability to get wages and the power that they actually hold in society, and the massive amount of people that are no longer in the workforce, giving a reduction in the amount of people in the workforce, meaning more tighter supply, which means further wage increases. So that's why we're seeing this here. Full stop, 100%. Pandemics and wars always help labor. Yes, they do. Sadly, it is one of those things. It is a little bit of silver lining about it, but not anything that anybody should be super happy about. But it is what it is. And thanks, Universal Discourse. I appreciate the shout out. Appreciate it. Let us continue on now with some more news about the economy, and now talking about the bank crises silver lining. So, in reporting from Market Insider, while fears about the impact of banking crisis are preying on markets, there could be a little bit of a silver lining for the U.S. economy on the whole, according to the Wharton professor Jeremy Siegel. While Paul Krugman has warned the chaos has increased the risk of a U.S. recession, Siegel has more upbeat in his weekly commentary. Quote, "The recent turmoil in the markets also makes me more optimistic on the outlook for 2024, Siegel said in commentary on Monday. Continuing on, he stated, quote, "If this banking accident occurred later, we would have much higher rates," he added, referring to the Federal Reserve's aggressive interest rate campaign. So, continuing on, he said, "So, a natural downshift in how tight our policy will become for this one is one of the silver linings from this current banking crisis. The collapse of Silicon Valley Bank has shifted investors' focus away from high inflation, the Fed's nemesis, onto risk around credit. The second biggest bank failure in the United States history, the shutdown of Signature Bank and the government-backed takeover of Credit Suisse by UBS, have driven a wave of pessimism in the market. The banking turmoil is doing some of the U.S. central bank's job for it by tightening financial conditions, according to several analysts. Those tightening of the financial conditions means that banks themselves are pulling back on their credit offers. And bank credit is money. Customers are also shifting their deposits to bigger banks, though, which are typically less likely to lend to businesses, while the risk of further bank runs could prompt some institutions to turn cautious on making loans, which is why the banks themselves gathered together and deposited a massive amount of money into to Republic Bank, and why the Federal Reserve came in and guaranteed all deposits on the banks that were under trouble, which is great. My neighbor guy with an I, they make a good point. So let me pull that into this really quick. So, not another recession. There is a possibility here for the soft landing to still happen, specifically because of the bank failures and the Federal Reserve's quick action for those bank failures, as well as the fact that the disinflation is continuing and there is continued job growth going with it. I'm not going to say that we're not going to have a recessionary event. We could see a short but deep one happen in September or so. The months that get weird with financial reporting happen in around the beginning of quarter 2, which is what we're getting into, and the beginning of quarter 3. So that's around September or October timeframe. One, because of how a lot of financial services and businesses do their financial reporting. Those are done on a tax year basis, so that they're reported either from the first of the year to first year, or from April to April. And so there's some weird wonky stuff with that. And then you have tax season, which kind of smooths things over. People are paying their taxes, they're getting some of their money back. They're that sort of thing causes a small buying spree in the summer months. And then you have winter coming with September, where a lot of things can get shaky. So that is a possibility. Stay safe with your money. But yes, fiscal, like Lola J said, tax year versus fiscal or operating year. True. So that, and then also the government does its financials from October to October of every year. So these are weird things, right? These are where all the weird data comes in. And so we have a reprieve. We'll likely have a reprieve for the next couple of months, but September can be really wonky. Now, my neighbor guy with an I said, great, bigger banks getting bigger. Yes. However, as we reported last week, those bigger banks getting bigger rushed to save one of the smaller bank institutions, Republic Bank. They took $30 billion collectively and deposited it into those accounts. A lot of it coming from that bank to make sure that the bank wouldn't have a run. So it's kind of weird in this situation. We have a lot of really rich people, really connected, really energizers of the new economy coming with crypto and Web3, AI, yeah, and as well as a lot of startups, Etsy, etc. We have those people making hay about it and wanting to have their deposits kept safe. And because they represent such a big fraction of the economy, they were stopped from eating a large loss. Will they eat a loss? I think the CEOs are going to eat a loss. The investors in those banks are going to eat a loss. Crypto's going to eat the loss. A lot of these crypto firms are eating a loss. But the businesses themselves, the ones that did the deposits in these institutions, honestly, I don't think they should. And I think the case should be made, and it can be made, and it should be thought about more for the federal government just ensuring all deposits for everything. Make the FDIC a little more expensive to be able to ensure all deposits, because the federal government or the FDIC making depositors whole doesn't actually increase any inflation, because that inflation's already baked in with the amount of credit the banks have already created using the fractional reserve system. And as long as you don't make that result in higher taxes for people, or at least higher taxes on middle and lower income people, I think it's a wash. And it's actually a better thing to keep the system more stable and prevent panics, useless panics like we were just in just now. That's what I'm at with that. Yes. Okay. So before I end on this segment, there is one further response coming from chat, where Changebox always coming in with good stuff here. So there is private insurance for balances in excess of 250K. And he went on to say, to quote, these tech startups were just too lazy to figure that out. Partly true. Whether or not a tech startup is financially savvy enough to handle this, they're going to listen to their venture capitalist about what their things are, because it's their money. They have equity stake in it. Where their head was at, I don't know. Whether it was too lazy, lack of knowledge, whatever. But as far as there being private insurance for the excess of 250K, yes, but, and this is a not a big but one that needs to be stated, there isn't enough private insurance out there to insure everyone's deposits over 250K, because the way those insurance policies work is that they're bets. And so those bets are not if there's not another person on the other side of that bet, then those insurance policies aren't going to be sold to people, because that's how everybody hedges. So you can't have everybody having insurance on all money, because if there's nobody on the other side to take the bet, then that is too much of a risk loss to the institutions. And so they're not going to offer it to everybody. So there's that. And yeah, me neighbor said, yeah, or deposits in more than one bank. That's another way to possibly do it. Again, venture capitalists are going to tell you to use a single bank, especially if that bank gives you favorable returns on your large deposits, which Silicon Valley Bank was doing. It wasn't huge. It wasn't like this grand, like big thing about it, but it was about a percentage or two higher than normal return rates. All right. So yeah, that, my friends, concludes our segment about the economy. Now, if you haven't joined us before, hey, welcome everybody. Appreciate you being here. But we like to talk about some news of the weird to wrap up our new segments here. And this week's news of the weird is a little bit weird and interesting when it comes to science. So let me do this. So this is a whale with a few kinks to work out. A gigantic 56-foot fin whale with severe scoliosis was spotted swimming offshore near the city of Valencia, Spain earlier this month, and scientists were able to capture the rare sight on tape, which we will turn to now. I have it muted. There will not be sound for this in case of a copyright strike with the music that's playing. So let's go ahead and play this here. So you can see this, you can see the sharks and the whales, and then here comes the whale. Where's the whale at? All right, where am I supposed to? So they're seeing all this. They're seeing this massive school of fish here. Let's just fast forward this a bit more. Come on. I don't want to sit here forever. Oh, where's this? All right. Oh, there it is. Yeah, weird, huh? Anyways, that's where the whale was. So the 40-ton fella, whose body was contorted into a V-like shape, wound up caught in a drift net on March 4th and was first sighted by a local boat captain, who quickly radioed maritime authorities. Jam Press reported, my bad. Scientists at Valencia's Oceanic Foundation described the whale's condition as scoliosis of unknown origin that altered his natural body autonomy in a Spanish language focused post. And that, my friends, actually we do conclude our news roundup with that. Thank you everybody so much for joining us today. The feedback from the audience was great. I appreciate y'all, because if it wasn't for you, I would just be a dweeb shouting into the void that is the internet. So we greatly appreciate every single one of you. Appreciate it. You make this all worthwhile. And we hit 100 messages today, so that's cool too. We do the news roundup every Thursday, unless otherwise stated, from 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, covering the news that was with the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. We also do other podcasts. We're going to be bringing back up our essays and our podcast focused things where you can get our podcast on any podcast streaming service that there is, and those will be cross-posted to YouTube as well. We have some right now. There's a lot of exclusives from the past on our podcast streaming apps because we started as a podcast. Our attendance doesn't not make you a dweeb. Oh, that is true. Facts have been stated. Chargebox coming out the end. Yes, it does not make me a dweeb. Yes, I am still very much a political nerd, but hey, I'm a political nerd with an audience, which is great, and I appreciate y'all. We also do another podcast called Cipher State, which is foreign affairs and foreign policy focused podcast. We haven't done that in a while. Been hard to maintain that because we want to have that to be more of a discussion with other people, but we're hoping to bring that back up coming at you after my vacation to Scotland as well. So yeah, that's where we're at. Special thanks to our Facebook community, which we still do, who helps us curate the news roundup with some articles. And special thanks to our producer, Nikki Adams. Without her, this cast would not exist in the quality that it does, because she really does do a lot of work with the copy. So that we thank her. But we are now out of time. Stick around if you're on Twitch. We'll find someone to raid here in a second to get those comments out or whatever. And yeah, so with that, everybody, as we say at Crowdsource Politics, keep your head up through a political storm.